Welcome to Roundtail Radio, the podcast from Roundtail Community Church. Through our conversations, we discover the holy in the ordinary, find moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we're talking about when we talk about faith. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Leslie.
I always want to go, what we're talking about when we talk about faith.
I know, it sounds impressive.
Like, what are we talking about when we talk about faith? Like, I always want to do something with that moment.
We get to find out every week.
You find out as we do, folks. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
We were just chatting about how, whether we like it or not, Advent is almost here.
Yeah, the first season of the Christian calendar.
Yes, that's right. That always catches me off guard.
I know.
Because I'm like, is it Advent? Is it Easter? Like, what's happening?
Yeah.
I should know this. I don't.
It's the start.
It's Advent. Mm-hmm. Okay. So how does Advent start normally?
So the great thing about Advent is that it's this 4-week prelude to Christmas. Mm-hmm. And it's like, whoa, holding us back, right? Not, hold on, don't celebrate quite yet, right? Mm-hmm. It's sort of gearing us up. And one of the lovely things about Advent as a season is that it's associated with the color blue, as in hope.
Hope.
And I like to think this year especially that blue is a great color to keep in mind because we're entering the winter season. Mm-hmm. Rightly so. People are a little concerned about doing that, right? Because we're still faced by challenges related to COVID-19. I think morale seems to be going through a better phase right now. Yeah. But nevertheless, the winter months can be a challenge in our part of the world. And so a good thing to think about hope. And Advent is also this time of year when we get to think about new beginnings, which can be sometimes welcome and sometimes disruptive, depending on what's going on with your life.
Right.
So if you think you've got some nice order in your life and all of a sudden someone says, you know what, we're going to shake that up a little bit and create something new, that's not always welcome.
I've always liked the phrase, you plan, God laughs.
Yeah, there you go.
Like that feels accurate.
Yeah.
To me.
I think that's right. So I guess what we get to figure out in Advent is, what is God actually planning? Right? Mm-hmm. So, because yes, we do have our plans and then other things happen. Mm-hmm. But the Advent is a season that suggests that God is always planning and planning to start new things in the world, which start in incredibly small ways. And I think that's part of the message of Christmas is that the baby Jesus was born in the middle, in the midst of a time of the Roman Empire, about as tiny and insignificant a creature as there could possibly be given the Roman Empire and its values, strength and honor. And nevertheless, through that one child came more than just a little new beginning, but a whole new era.
Well, and Bethlehem was a fairly sort of country,
out of the way
village, right? This wasn't like
backcountry,
if you will. If you know, you know.
Backcountry.
It always cracks me up that Greenwich has this term backcountry. Yeah. And if you've been up here, it is really anything but what you would anticipate it being.
It's not quite Bethlehem.
No.
Yeah.
No, not at all. But it's, it's funny about, I think about obviously music for Advent. Mm-hmm. And my more purist organist friends, we always have conversations about, the question is basically how much Advent do you give them?
Right.
Or how much Advent do you insist upon versus Christmas? And I've ebbed and flowed over the years. I've had a little more, I've been drawn a harder line some years than others at different churches I've served. This year, I'll be honest, I feel like I'm like, just give them,
let's sing.
In the words of that great song, we all need a little Christmas.
Yeah, I think that's why it ebbs and flows.
Yeah,
right.
Because I try to respond to what's happening, and I'm like,
yes.
can we start now? Like, let's just start now.
You probably wouldn't get resistance.
I just can't,
I know.
Well,
hymns, carols, these are like time machines, right? They bring us back in time.
They are.
And they connect us to very, very special personal moments as well as moments in the world at large. And so we understand that some years we really want to call upon a certain reservoir of music because we need that.
Tidings of comfort and joy.
We need tidings of comfort and joy.
They're great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of ride on that magic carpet of sound.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, it's hard to be sad when you've got like a fire in the fireplace and there's twinkly lights.
Yeah.
Like this sort of magical, like January is tough for me.
Yeah. Right.
There isn't Christmas music. There isn't like the cheerful, the way that we can affect our spaces and make things beautiful and twinkly and magical. It's just so fun. And
well, it's a good point about, once we get into January and February, those are harder months for people. And, but the thing about as the Christian seasons unfold is that if Advent is the sowing of something really small towards hope, then January and February can be the nurture of that thing. We start to cultivate it. So what was this new thing? What is this new thing that's starting to take shape in our lives? And what nourishment does it need?
Oh, that's nice.
Right, as we get into January and February.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned to you, Leslie, that I heard an interview recently with Nick Offerman, the comedian.
I love him
who's
so
a great presence.
So great.
And he was asked the question, well, he's been talking, he just wrote a book, Where the Deer and the Antelope Play, which even a fantastic title for a book.
That's good.
But about the very simple relationship that he's developed, maybe not so simple relationship with nature during the pandemic, and how relatively simple walks have meant so much to him. And he has said that, if you're living in an environment, especially in the winter where you can't get out much, you can still use your windowsill to create some life, something that you can nurture. And it could be a small potted plant or an herb or whatever. And but you just gently kind of keep track of it.
I like that.
And I think you do that. That's the amazing thing. We do that even when the landscape is a lot more forbidding and keeps things going.
Yeah.
So
the idea of sowing those seeds and then nourishing them is such a caring thing. So how can we do that for ourselves as we sort of look forward over the next few months?
Yeah. Well, I think it comes back to that theme of self-compassion. Right. And I've noticed that in the conversations that I've been having this autumn with people who are thinking about what it means to live a compassionate life, this theme of self-compassion has risen right up to the surface.
Yeah.
Right. It's been very important. I think it's like a thread that's run through many of our conversations.
For sure.
And I get the sense that, we kind of know it intellectually, but maybe we say, okay, yeah, I know what that means. But we've begun to understand that just rudimentary self-care, it's important, but it's not necessarily the same thing as self-compassion.
Right.
And I think to your question, that as we get into the next couple of months and starting to get into winter and the season of Advent and beyond, self-compassion is really about giving ourselves time to listen to ourselves, not just to those around us. And it's also about giving ourselves the space to dream, towards the future. Christmas stories are so full of dreams. It's interesting, that the Magi have a dream. Joseph has a dream. In a sense, even Mary, with her beautiful, the language of the Magnificat, it's a dream of what the world looks like when there's justice. And so it can be a time for us to ask, what's the vision of the world that we want to live towards? And then maybe during the season of Advent, we can start to identify some simple milestones that will help us move towards that dream. Some changes that we could make in our lives, or maybe a deeper commitment to something related to peace, justice, or the environment.
Yeah.
Right. And that can all be part of cultivating something, but it's also good for ourselves. Right. I was reading recently in a couple of different books about there's a real interesting connection between a selfless act and a release of goodwill within ourselves. That when we're engaged in doing something good for someone else, it's also good for us at the same time. The body responds to that physiologically.
Sure.
And so those can be things we can think about as we approach these seasons of Thanksgiving, Advent, Christmas, and beyond.
I like the thing you said a minute ago about breaking them down into milestones. This idea of like manageable bites or finding ways to mark whatever big project or big goal you have into something tangible and simple and achievable.
Yeah. It makes me think of when I was in college, I had a couple of friends. We used to hike the sections of the Appalachian Trail. And when you're on the trail, you know that out there is the goal, which is to get off the trail and get into a hot shower.
Sounds good. Yeah.
After a week of
hiking, right?
And but I always noticed an interesting thing that would happen on the trail. You become aware of the milestones. Like, okay, we're at mile 5 now. We're at mile 10, and the goal, while important, if not essential, would sort of disappear.
Oh, yeah.
And the only thing that really mattered was taking one step in front of the next one on the trail.
Right.
And I noticed this a few years ago when Susan and I had a chance to walk through a very, very long section of the Cotswolds in England. It was just beautiful country. So we knew at the end of each day we were trying to get to a village where we would stay for the night. But that really isn't something I was thinking about during the actual hiking during the day. It was more like the milestone.
Okay.
We would know that we would have 14 miles to hike that day.
Okay.
So we're at mile 3. This feels good. Mile 7. This is good. And those things kept us going. So it was almost all about process. And then you just trusted that the goal would work itself out. And I really like that understanding.
Yeah.
And I think, again, we're coming into a season. It's all about a vision of peace on earth and goodwill among all people. And we're not there, right? Well, that's not what we experience right now. So what would be the milestones that would help us to get there? Would it be, reading a certain book and then having conversations and being part of a study group, worshiping on a regular basis? Those become the milestones. And like week by week, lo and behold, it adds up.
Yeah.
Right?
I think there's also another element of that is brought to my mind, that perfection can often get in the way of progress.
Yeah. Oh,
I am very much a person, this will surprise nobody, that, like I make these huge goals for myself of like doing something every day, and then I do it every day for like 10, 15 days. And then I miss a day. And then I'm like, well, it's all over now.
That's the end of that.
Yeah, that was the end of that. And then it's like,
Yep.
which obviously is not ideal because you give up, right? If it's not perfect,
Yes.
then you give up. Versus this idea, I've heard someone suggest 80%, which is still a very large number. But that if you're 80% consistent at whatever it is you want to do, that's the goal. It was actually, as a podcast I listened to, this guy named Jordan Syatt, who's like a personal trainer and nutrition guy. And he's so realistic.
Love it.
He's like, if you come to me with a month of every day your nutrition is perfect, I don't want to see that. He's like, that means you're not having any fun, which isn't sustainable.
Give yourself some space.
Like people ask him on Instagram, like, oh, what do you eat on vacation? He's like, I eat whatever I want on vacation. It's vacation. Have your vacation.
Step back away and take a little breather.
Right. Like have that self-compassion and have this idea that we're always supposed to be perfect. And that completely cuts you off at the knees. Having these realistic goals.
Yeah. I certainly, I didn't really come from this culture, but I certainly developed the attitude throughout most of my life, that everything really did have to be perfect.
Oh yeah. I came from that culture, I can tell you.
So
it's real.
One way or the other, right? We get there.
Yeah.
But in the last few years, I had a friend actually who said, don't let perfect be the enemy of good here.
Right.
So, and I remember there was a book written on parenting some years ago by a man named Bruno Bettelheim, which was called A Good Enough Parent. And a friend of mine, and well, actually, in this case, it was a woman in one of my congregations. She said she never read that book, but she kept it on her nightstand. And every morning she would wake up and see a good enough parent. She thought, I can do that.
That's all
It didn't
she
say
needed.
be a perfect parent, be a
Right.
good enough parent.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that she just, she couldn't even bring herself to read this thing.
I love that's great. There's a similar title I've seen my friend has, which is called Bare Minimum Parenting, which I like,
So I think there's a change that's happening, and when it comes to things like goals, there's kind of a shrinking away from some of that language now, because part of the problem with goals is that we get there and then we think, okay, I did that. Now what? I guess I better set up another goal.
Yeah.
And so I'm also hearing the word minimal used in relationship to habits. Right. So we're shifting a little bit away from goals and a little bit more in the direction of habits,
Right.
but the same language is used. What is the minimal amount of thing I need to do to give this habit a little breathing life?
Yeah.
And I really like that. Right.
Yeah.
So it's not even do this thing. Oh, yeah, well, I guess I'll read for an hour every day. No, I'm not going to read for an hour every day because I'm going to set myself up for failure. Right.
Right.
So you say, you know what? I'm just going to read for a minute. Well, then you read for a minute. Say, oh, okay, look, I'm into it now. I might as well stay.
Right.
Right. And before you know it, maybe you're reading for 30 minutes. But it's this tininess. And I'm so fascinated by that, because I think that's a very important part of the Christian story. That actually grand, amazing things happen from these tiny, tiny, tiny moments. And that's why the language of Christmas is really overblown in a way. It's peace on earth, goodwill. It's the Magnificat. It's beautiful language. But it's all happening because of the birth of one little baby in this backwater country in the Roman Empire. So what could we do in our lives? One tiny little action, do something different to set things moving in a different direction. That's really intriguing to me.
That's wonderful. I love that so much. And it's just a total different approach to things. I'm going to change topics real quick.
Change topics.
As we wind down our episode, because if you can believe it, we are coming up on episode 100 of Round Hill Radio, which is kind of amazing.
Started with one.
Right? And we were kind of went, well, we'll see how this goes.
That doesn't seem possible.
I know.
100.
100. We began this in 2017, and we did it kind of every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We gave ourselves lots of grace. Kind of, sort of ish. And so we're coming up on that, and we would love to get some of our wonderful listeners and community involved in the 100th episode. So if you have any questions, comments,
be great.
As I say to my choir, questions, comments, concerns, please send them to podcast@roundhillcommunitychurch.org. And we will see if we can read them on our episode. We'd love to get you involved, hear some thoughts, any questions you might have for Ed. I doubt you have any questions for me,
Leslie.
but I'll try something. It will be, I believe, the second or third week in December.
My goodness.
So you've got a couple weeks. And we thank you all so much for making this possible. We have so much fun doing this podcast. And so it wouldn't be possible without your participation, without your listenership and support. So thank you one and all. This has been Round Hill Radio, brought to you by the friends and members of Round Hill Community Church.